Hey folks, welcome to another Top 10 videos. This Top 10 is related to the Dark Souls 2 Scholar of the First Sin Let's Play. If you haven't seen it, you're more than welcome to click on this annotation right here. However though, this Top 10 is going to be just like it has been for the past two Top 10s that I've done for Dark Souls as well as Bloodborne. And the one is that these contains all the bosses from all of the parts. In other words, from the main game as well as from the DLCs. Also too, I should also mention, no repeated bosses, which is why you're seeing the Smelter Demon boss fight in this clip right here. While it is my favorite, it is considered to be a repeated boss, so that's why it's not on this top 10, and instead it's on this intro. Oh, and I Platinum Dark Souls 2. Sorry if I didn't show the clip. But at least you got to see it. Somehow or another. Okay, so let's begin the top 10. Number 10 goes to the Giant Lord. This boss is, however, not so hard, but rather is an interesting design. Especially when you consider the fact that the giants are all regular enemies, or the bosses just like the last giant. The Giant Lord is probably one of the more simpler designs. Has like a cape-like design around his waist, as well as a crown. And of course a giant sword, so it's not too hard of a design. But it's also one of the easiest bosses that I've actually fought, so take that with a grain of salt, especially when you consider that everything else just wants to kill you. This one just one shot hits you, but if you're careful, it's not too bad. Oh, and also too, you're more than welcome to try to summon either the Captain or Benhart. Number 9 goes to both the Lost Sinner as well as the Rotten. For the first time, I actually had a tie on this one because both of these bosses are not only interesting, but they're actually well executed, I thought. Especially when you consider the fact that both of them are boss souls. So why both of them instead of one? Well, personally, both of them are actually a little bit better in terms of fighting specs as well as design. The Lost Sinner can be found in Lost Basilisk, and the Rotten can be found in the Dark Gutter. The Lost Sinner is an interesting lore because of the fact that it was trying to lit the flame of the final flame in Dark Souls 1. As for the Rotten, it's just a pile of corpse with a giant axe. But it has elements such as dark and apparently its resistance to fire, I guess? Otherwise it wouldn't trail underneath this fire pile of oil, that is. Again, both of these bosses I had a hard time trying to decide which one I liked it better. So I figured, I'll just put both of them at number 9. Number 8 goes to the Old Dragon Slayer, aka Orenstein. There is some dispute whether or not Orenstein is actually what we're fighting, or if it's someone else that's wearing Orenstein's armor. I say it probably is Orenstein, but considering the fact that it's wielding Dark Element, it's kinda hard to decipher that fact. So instead of wielding Thunder Element and being weak to fire, it is actually Dark Element, in which case it's weak against magic. There is some different opinions as well as some different lore aspects as to why Orenstein is there in that area instead of a different boss altogether. What's my opinion? It's Orenstein. Plain and simple. You want any more details? Go check out anybody who has lore videos on Dark Souls 2 or Dark Souls 1 or Bloodborne. Recommendedly, Silvermont. Number 7 goes to Sir Lohn. I know what you're going to be asking yourself. Sir Lohn? You were having trouble with this boss. Yeah, but that doesn't mean I enjoyed this boss fight altogether. He is a difficult one, but I say if you practice with it long enough, you should be able to figure it out. That and it has to be better than the Fume Knight. It turns out that both Fume Knight as well as Sir Lohn are actually brothers in this case. And from what I've heard, if you wear one armor or the other, depending on which boss you fight, chances are the other one will get super power at the beginning of the fight, in terms of rage. But that's what I've heard. It's an interesting idea as well as an interesting design. What makes Sir Lohn interesting is considering the fact that it is more or less of one of the only true samurais in the game. You never really get to fight an actual samurai, or if you do, it's mostly through PvP. Personally, I liked it, Sir Lohn. The only problem is, the only way you can actually fight this boss is if you defeat the Foom Knight first. So, yeah. Good luck with that. Number 6 goes to the Dark Lurker. Dark Lurker is an interesting boss as well as one of the coolest bosses I've actually had to fight. It's not really hard, it's just you have to be careful with your timing. He is very weak against fire, so naturally if you're really good with your timing as well as pyromancies, the moment that he splits in two you'll be able to use a pyromancy attack, in which case it does double damage because there are two of them. The only problem is my execution in that ideal did not work very well, and as instead I was very careful in using my magic. Which worked out in the end, I thought. My only gripe with this boss is that you have to go to 3 different areas to find this guy in order to fight through 3 different areas in order to even have access to fight the Dark Lurker boss fight. So, again, boss, really cool. Getting to it, it is a pain in the ass. But would I do it again? Yeah, I guess I would. Number 5 goes to Shu, the Slumber E Dragon. That is how you pronounce it, right? I hope so. What's interesting about this boss is that according to the lore, it is considered to be a worshipped deity in the Sunken Crown DLC. So that's why whenever you beat the dragon, you got the crown in the process of it. What's interesting about this boss is that there are a couple things that you need to remember while fighting this boss. Number 1, it's made of stone. So in other words, as you're attacking it, your weapons will break. I cannot stress that enough. If you see in my playthrough, I broke my weapons many times. I guess if I had some lightning element, it would probably make the fight a little bit better, considering the fact that dragons are weak against the lightning attacks. I was really happy to fight another dragon in this game, because in Dark Souls 1, it was definitely one of the best as well as one of the most awesomest boss fight in the game. So why is he at number 5? Well, awkwardly enough, there were actually 4 more that were actually better than this one. Number 4 goes to the Old Iron King. Wait, we can't use that clip? Damn you, copyright claims! Yeah, when I first fought this boss, it was definitely reminiscent to the enemy from The Lord of the Rings. That's basically all there is to say, except for the fact that it's really cool and awesome. I really love this one. I was really interested and I was really in-depth to the fight. So, unlike the Lost Sinner and the Rotten, this one is definitely my personal favorites, and I would definitely refight it over and over again. Just not the spider! Fuck you, spider! Number 3 goes to the Burnt Ivory King. Now before I explain why this one is one of my favorite boss fights, I know that I have to save 3 of the Ivory Knights in order to actually fight through this boss. So that's out of the way, let me explain why this one is my favorite boss. Number 1, other than being able to find 3 more of the Ivory Knights in order to fight in this round, is actually considered to be the Fight Club of Dark Souls 2, which I thought was interesting. This is definitely one of the more funner, as well as probably one of the more over-the-top plays I have ever seen. Seriously, the second you get through fighting these lesser burnt knights, you actually get to see Ivory King actually step out through this giant-ass portal and making a scene. This is definitely over the top. Even though the Burnt Ivory King wasn't really that hard, it could be because of the fact that the players that I summoned were actually MLGs. More than likely, I say. Thank you guys, you were just too awesome back there. More than what I could handle, probably. So again, Burnt Ivory King is number 3. Number 2 goes to the Ancient Dragon. You also knew that this boss fight was going to be on here as well, except it got a lot higher than the Slumbering Dragon. I found out, after playing it through a second time that is, that technically you don't have to fight the Ancient Dragon. I did not realize that. I feel kind of stupid now. But, I mean, no offense, I wanted to fight the Ancient Dragon because, holy crap, this thing was awesome. Some people may have some trouble with this boss fight, but there are a couple ways that you can actually go through this boss with breeze. Number 1, have as much fire resistant as possible. So in other words, if you get knocked back by the fire, you still have a chance to actually recover. Second of all, it's actually easier if you have a ranged weapon like magic or even that of hexes. If you try to sword fight your way through this, you might make it through, but I sincerely doubt it. Mostly because, well, he can stomp you. Yeah, I found that out the hard way. Another thing too that should be mentioned as well is that the Ancient Dragon is considered to be a loyal deity. So in other words, after you kill it, if you're not ready to run, chances are you're going to be fighting a mob right behind you. Guess I should have saw that coming, shouldn't I? I was wondering why they never attacked me. So you're probably asking yourself, wait, the Ancient Dragon number 2, what's number 1? Well, awkwardly enough, it's actually a final boss, but not Nadalia. Throughout your entire journey, after you defeat the 4 boss souls, you encounter it. When you enter in the Undead Crypt, you encounter him. And when you get to the Dragon Sanctuary, you also encounter him. For some reason, Scholar of the First Sin became one of the biggest taglines of the game. Scholar of the First Sin. An unusual name, but mostly because it is actually who you are going to be fighting later on. Adalia, Scholar of the First Sin. While yeah, the 2 throne defenders are pretty cool, and Nadalia is actually pretty cool, Adalia is actually probably one of the craziest as well as one of the biggest and epic battles of all time. Honestly, I was not expecting to fight him. Well, I guess I should have suspected that, considering the fact that it is practically the title of the game, but I don't know. Part of me just thinks that it seems weird that we get to fight this guy. And what's awkwardly enough, he basically tells us the truth of the world. The truth of Dark Souls. For every person that comes through and rekindles the flame, for every person that takes on the throne of the kingdom, was it worth it? Eventually you too will go hollow. So instead of curing yourself, you only increase your disease. The Scholar of the First Sin is more or less of a warning sign that unless something changes, everything will repeat. Adalia, you are indeed my number 1 pick for my favorite Dark Souls 2 boss fights. Indeed, you are the Scholar of the First Sin. Thank you so much for watching my top 10 Dark Souls 2 Scholar of the First Sin boss fights. And I do hope to do more top 10s in the future, just some different ones and not just top 10s boss fights. But if you haven't seen any of my playthroughs, you're more than welcome to check out my Dark Souls 2, Dark Souls 1, as well as Bloodborne. Also, if you want to check out my other top 10s, there's an annotation right here that'll lead you to my other 2. Thank you so much for watching, and thank you so much for subscribing to my channel, as well as making my channel even more awesomer. And I hope to see you in the next video. Take care, guys.